everybody, Erica Reddick with Generally Irritable, coming to you today with a fun and kind of interesting episode of Generally Irritable today. Rather than just talking about politics and the nature of politics and all the dumb stuff that's going on in the world, I wanted to bring you something fun and interesting and a little piece of culture, a little piece of art that everyone can enjoy that isn't filled to the brim with a bunch of wokeism and a bunch of preachy nonsense, okay? Who's up for some culture and some art that isn't trying to tell you that you're every istophobe there is in the book? I know I am. And so I've got author Joe Covais with me today, and we're going to be talking about his third book. It's called Bound by Faith. As I said, it's number 3 in the series Psychotherapy with Ghosts. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right. So it's number 3. Again, you guys, you have to go out and get all 3 on Amazon, right? You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on your website.
I don't have a
Are there
website
links on,
as such.
Yet? Okay, so go to Amazon, get the series Psychotherapy with Ghosts, and especially this one, you guys. I'm really excited about book 3. This could easily be a book report for your high school or middle schoolers. This is just an excellent, well-written narrative series that has a basis in historical fact. Is that right, Joe?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
very much so.
So tell us a little bit about about this series, Psychotherapy with Ghosts, and what... Now, before I forget, you guys, Joe isn't just an author, he's also a psychotherapist. And did I say it right? A psychotherapist?
A psychotherapist.
Okay, so I didn't
correct.
realize there were so many versions of psychologist until Joe and I started talking. So he is a psychotherapist, and he also teaches psychology here in Vermont. And so there's actually not only actual historical people in this book, but you actually bring some therapeutic conversations into it.
There's a lot about practicing psychotherapy in these novels.
Novels. So this is
because one of the main characters is a psychotherapist a former psychotherapist.
Okay. So tell the viewers a little bit about the gist of the series and what inspired you to write it.
Essentially, the novels take place 2 plot lines, one in 1840, one in 1970. I would say the primary plot is in 1970. And it is about a Manhattan psychologist who quits his practice to start his life over again as an antique dealer.
In upstate.
On the New York side of Lake Champlain. He buys an abandoned building and moves in. And starts to restore it and discovers that one room is haunted.
Ooh.
And of course it's haunted by a beautiful young woman.
So that can't be too bad, you know? I mean, if you're gonna have a ghost, she should be hot,
if
right?
you have to be up all night doing psychotherapy with someone,
they might as well be good looking.
of course.
I'm just saying.
It is a novel after all. So it is about how his therapeutic experience with this ghost who is clearly troubled, right? I would say probably all ghosts need a psychotherapist.
Yeah, because the idea is they're like kind of trapped here on Earth, right?
Exactly. She's troubled. And through his psychotherapeutic experiences with her, he also changes as well. So essentially, over the course of the 3 novels, he teaches her that, or helps her to realize that the reason she's trapped between life and afterlife is because she refuses to forgive God for the events of her real life.
Yeah.
And she shows him that there is a God because he comes into it as a very staunch atheist.
Interesting. So they kind of meet in the middle almost, right? So he's coming at it with this God doesn't exist, atheist attitude, and she's angry at God.
Yes.
So that is a really interesting dynamic to put together, that an atheist could help a believer come to forgiveness for their creator.
Yeah, as his real life girlfriend says to him, you can't believe in ghosts and not believe in God.
That's an interesting, why not?
Because if you believe in ghosts, then you believe that there is a greater dimension to reality.
Okay, so like a spirit realm.
Yes, there's a spirit realm, exactly.
Okay.
And if you accept that, then how much farther of a leap is it that the spirit realm has some purpose behind it?
Yeah.
And isn't that kind of implying that there is a God? I mean, whether you want to use the G word or not, okay? And some people are very fussy about that.
Right.
But whether you want to use that word or not, isn't that what accepting the spirit realm is saying?
Well, I would agree with you. Like, you can't say that nothing else exists, right? If you believe in ghosts or you believe in aliens or you believe in a lot of these things, to me, it sort of implies that you believe that there is something greater than you, that there is something bigger than you. And to deny that doesn't really make sense to me.
Well, I would agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got these two parallel timelines,
yes,
right?
And yeah, right. That's the 1970 plot.
So that's what the 1970 plot line is, kind of where the narration is taking place, right? That's what your main character, your main guy, is in the 70s, and it's kind of tracking his life with flashbacks to the 1800s.
And then every other chapter takes place in 1840.
Right.
Is written more or less in the style of a Gothic romance.
Yes.
And explains the events of the ghost character's life, which led her to becoming trapped between life and afterlife.
Well, and I love that you don't shy away from the realities of that time period. So sometimes when you read books, they will whitewash, or they will, just sort of ignore facets of what life was like back then. So as an example, in this book, with a couple of the characters from the 1800s, right? So you've got, I don't want to spoil anything.
All right, don't you dare.
I know, but you've got one character as an example who has a slave, who has a servant with her.
Yeah.
And you don't shy away from this, how uncomfortable it was for this Southern girl to bring her slave up north, and that how she was looked at a certain kind of way, and how even Tildy changed in that, how being in a different environment helped her realize that she wasn't being treated well, and that she did not have to be, she didn't have to accept being treated as a slave.
Neither one of them had ever been out of South Carolina before. So
that
they had no idea of what to expect when they got to Albany, New York.
Right.
Which was a pretty strong abolitionist city in those days.
Was it?
At the time, sure.
So that part of it is true.
That part of it is true, yes.
And so when we think about how much of our culture and the way that we are, this is one of the things I say, is it's a lack of proximity. Right? If we're never around people who are different, if we never experience a different way of life or living, how can we, number one, understand those people, and number two, ever change or have something new come of it?
Yes, and?
So was it intentional that you that you brought these uncomfortable conversations to, because you didn't have to talk about that stuff. You didn't have to make that a part of the book.
I didn't. What in fact happened was not really intentional from the get-go. Mm-hmm. What in fact happened was, in my research about the Albany Female Academy, which was a real, very prestigious school at the time.
Yeah.
I noticed I got hold of a list of graduates from the 1830s and 40s, and I noticed that there was more than a few from the South, from one in particular from Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me, if she came up here from Charleston, South Carolina, it would be highly probable that she would have had at time, because she would have come from a wealthy family. That meant they would have been a slaveholding family. That meant she would have had a personal servant.
Yeah.
And in all likelihood, that personal servant would have come with her. And that would have introduced some very awkward social situations.
Well, and it was almost like she knew there was something wrong with it, or she had a sense that there was some shame in that. Is it Rebecca? Is that the character's name, Rebecca?
Yeah.
It's like Rebecca knew that there was something wrong.
Yeah, but she feels like as long as she treats her servant well, and she does,
Right. Then it's okay.
then it's okay. Then what could be so bad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think you really highlight throughout the book the way that things used to be, whether we're talking about the 1840s or the 1970s. So even the way your characters are interacting, you're talking about some really hard subjects, again, without it being preachy. It's really just like, here are circumstances and situations people would have found themselves in back then. And what would a normal person have acted like? How would Angela, the main character's girlfriend, have reacted if she felt jealous of a ghost? How would that relationship have gone? And then even like the stewardess, the flight attendant, and the way that she reacts to our psychotherapist, and it's almost like every single interaction is a little microcosm of culture. Was that on purpose?
I think it is, yes.
Yeah.
In that I feel like that period of right about 1970 was sort of a pivot point in our culture today.
Yeah.
So much of what we live with today was new and trendy and progressive in 1970.
Yeah.
I don't think it went well, but
That's what you get, this angst, right? Like that's, when I'm reading it, there's this angst that I feel that like everyone is uncomfortable in their own skin, if that makes sense. Or like they're trying to figure it out, right? Like there's like a new expectation that the characters are wrestling with.
They are trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they kind of all agree that the best conclusion for all of us is this kind of casual sex world with the pill. And, you know, I have to admit that looking at society, looking at the course of the last 60 years, it hasn't worked out well.
Yeah.
I don't think so, but I don't want to get all preachy and heavy about this either, because we're not supposed to. It's not supposed to be that kind of a book. But I have to admit that is kind of implied.
Well, and I think, you know, just because we call the question and just because we want to have the conversation doesn't make it preachy. I think it's a question worth asking. Are we better off for the free love, free sex movement? And I mean, statistically,
well, if you read this book, the answer is no. But I'm 65. I probably wouldn't have said that when I was 25 or 35.
Oh my God, the main character's name is escaping me. David, right?
Yes.
David. So when we're looking at characters like David, right? So he's this psychotherapist, and he's trying to figure out his own way in the world, and what does he want to do now, right? He's having like midlife crisis isn't the way to say it, but I love that he's really digging in and asking these questions. He's questioning his belief in God, and isn't that really just what it is to be a human. Like finding your place in the world, figuring out what that looks like, how you want to interact with people. I feel, isn't that the struggle we're all supposed to go through into adulthood? Questioning those things?
I don't know if we're supposed to, but it seems like we do.
Yeah.
And what he finds is that he's living and has led a spiritually desolate life.
Yeah.
And it's not, doesn't really feel that good.
Well, and that's some of that free sex, free love stuff, right? It sort of leaves you empty.
Right, but if he's going to be hip and sophisticated and an intellectual, he doesn't have much of a choice. Because hip, sophisticated, intellectual people would feel that way. That this sort of free love world is the way it should be.
God, Joe, I feel like that's what
We're too hip for all those conventions.
That's what I feel like. That's like today. I feel like so much of what we hear in the media, what we see on social media or in the news or whatever is like, oh, well, if you don't believe this, this new trendy thing that society has said we like, then you're some kind of troglodyte, and you are not deserving of being part of a community, and you need to just go into your hole.
Yeah.
And so it's just, who benefits from that?
Well, I don't think anyone benefits from that.
Yeah. And you've even mentioned you feel like your field of psychology, psychotherapy, has kind of been taken over by this cultural, like it's less therapeutic than it is a forcing of beliefs from the culture.
Well, I would say that in many cases it is true.
Yeah.
That the field has a decided perspective on things. But just the same way education does. And, a lot of things in our society do. A bit polarized.
Yeah. And so do you think that there's a way that psychotherapy could, do you think it's like too late for the profession, or do you think there's an awakening that could happen?
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
It might be woven right into it. Because psychotherapy, as it exists today, psychotherapy is sort of the great-grandchild, let's say, of Freud.
Okay.
Freud was a very adamant atheist. So atheism is woven right into psychotherapy. No doubt there are things in people's lives which are best described as a spiritual disorder. But you can't address that if you're a psychotherapist. Because that's outside of the boundaries of the profession.
So so you're not like equipped for that, basically. Or it's not your job.
You're not equipped for it, and all of your training would discourage that.
Really?
Discourage acknowledging that. Yes.
Why?
Because psychology is basically a godless science.
But it doesn't seem like it should be antagonistic.
It would be like asking your accountant for spiritual guidance.
But but mind and spirit are so intertwined. That would mean that the profession would have to just disregard the spirit altogether. That doesn't exist. That everything is just about your brain, I guess, your personality.
Well, psychotherapy and psychology comes in a lot of different varieties.
Okay.
And it comes from everything from, let's say, neuroscience, which would be a completely objective, biologically based.
Okay.
Give people antidepressant drugs. To, say, some sorts of new agey, humanistically oriented therapy.
Okay.
Which sort of accepts the existence of a spiritual realm.
Okay.
As long as you don't call it God.
Because we're going to get hung up on the words.
Because we'll get very hung up on
Right.
that word.
Well, because I guess that's the idea,
Yeah,
that
so
there's a
everything in between
being
those
rather
two.
than like the universe or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I hear a lot of like
Yeah.
new agey people say is the universe, everything has energy. It's all about the energy, and that there's not an
Yes.
actual being that cares about you. It's just the all of it kind of thing.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
And so then, so what has it been like for you then? Because you did mention before we got started that you feel like there's at least some of you in your lead character. It's like a dialed up version of you.
Yeah, he's
it's
more
an
like me than me.
exaggerated
Yeah.
version of you.
Yeah.
And so has that been a journey have you followed that same journey where you kind of started out as an atheist and you've now come to believe, or how's that for
Yeah,
you?
absolutely. Absolutely. I had an interesting conversation with my ex-wife last year.
Oh, all right.
And I hadn't spoken to her in 20-something years.
Wow.
And I mentioned to her that I'd written these novels.
Yeah.
And she said, well, what are they about? And I said, well, this and that, and about our relationship with God.
Yeah.
That's really the point of these novels, is that we have to have a relationship with God.
Yeah.
Whether you have to think about that. And she started to laugh, and I said, what are you laughing at? She said, because when we were married, you were the most anti-God person I knew.
That's so funny. Was she a religious person, or was she spiritual in
No,
any
she
way?
was a Lutheran.
What?
Does that answer your question?
No, what does that do? Lutheran, that's a Christian, right?
She was your basic Protestant.
Okay, so somebody who believes in God but is not necessarily going to church every week and doing all the stuff.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Cool. So what was her reaction? Did you guys have further conversation about that? Like what it was like for you to come to God, or where she's at religiously, spiritually?
No.
Yeah. So then she wasn't the basis for Angela, your character, Angela.
No. And if you're asking if she then read these books, no, she didn't.
Yeah.
No, Angela is probably, I don't know, she's probably an amalgamation of some of my older sister's girlfriends.
I have to tell, I related to Angela a little bit because she's got a filthy mouth. She was smoking cigarettes in the diner. I was like, I feel like that would have been me in the 70s. I feel like I would have ended up.
Most people don't like her, by the way. Do you have that problem too, Erica?
I do. I'm a little bit brash.
Because you're generally irritable. That's why.
I am generally irritable.
Yeah.
That directness, she's very direct.
Yes, she is.
And she just does not care. I love that. I was like, I love the, you do such a good job in this book of really bringing out the personalities of your characters. I am invested in these people. I want to know what happens to them. I just love that the way that you have really cared for each and every individual character. You have fleshed them out as unique individuals. And that's one of the things, I don't normally read fiction novels, to be totally honest with you. I read Harry Potter. I've read very few fiction novels. Normally I'm reading things like the Federalist Papers, or what was race Marxism from James Lindsay. I'm trying to teach
I don't read
myself.
fiction either. Yeah.
What?
I don't.
But you wrote it?
I kind of deliberately don't read fiction because I didn't want my writing to sound derivative, but also because fiction doesn't generally interest me.
Yeah. Okay. So then what was the spurring in your heart, or what got you to write these books then?
I actually had a very creepy experience at my stepdaughter's home one morning.
Okay.
And it left me with the idea of how interesting it would be to sit down and have psychotherapeutic conversations with a ghost.
Oh my God, did you have a ghost experience?
Yeah.
Shut up. Okay, you have to tell us about the ghost experience.
Well, it was very, very, very early in the morning. So was I awake? Was I asleep? A hypnagogic state, right?
Okay.
Lying there, everyone else was up, but that doesn't mean anything because these people get up at 5:30 in the morning. And I'm laying there desperately trying to get maybe another 20 minutes of sleep.
Yeah.
This is an old house built in 1822.
Okay.
A cat can't walk across the room without floorboards creaking. And I was laying there, and I had a very, very, very distinct feeling that someone had come in the room through the doorway and walked around the perimeter of the room and up beside me, leaned over me, brought their face right before my face, held it there for a moment, then straightened up, turned around, and walked out.
Oh my God. Okay, and you were not sighted at this point.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, because so you haven't been blind your whole life.
No.
You gradually lost your sight.
Yes.
So the reason I'm bringing that up is because this isn't just like, at this point, you've already developed that sense of your surroundings, right? Like, even when you and I have gone places or walked around, it's clear that you can, even though that you have a sense of the things that are around you. It's not like,
I have to.
right? And so,
I can't depend on eyesight for that. So I have to depend on the slope of the ground and the smells and the wind direction and what I hear.
Exactly. So you have these heightened senses, and then you feel a presence. And I'm assuming you talked to your stepdaughter and she said, no, nobody was in your room. Or could you tell that it, oh.
I could tell no one was there. Because
hold on, you just said the floorboard wasn't creaking.
Right, exactly. Sure.
Wow.
Yeah, because I've had the grandkids come in, sneak in, like, let's scare them. I sit up and scare them. All right? I can tell. They're not kidding anyone.
Yeah, they're not going to creep in there.
So this experience was very much like one experience much earlier in my life.
Okay.
And that I had no question, but that was a paranormal experience.
And did you ask your stepdaughter, like, is this house haunted? Did you say anything to her about it?
At the time, I don't think I did.
Okay.
No. I just remember that the idea really stuck in my craw.
Yeah.
And so this was at Christmas time.
Okay.
And my late wife stayed there for another few weeks. So I was home alone in Burlington, Winooski, where I was living at the time.
Yeah.
And by then I had gotten this idea, what would it be like? And I just started writing something. And I didn't intend to write one novel or two or let alone three.
Yeah.
I felt really very self-conscious about writing fiction at the time because of the feeling like, well, every little word exposes me. Right? It's like bearing my soul to public scrutiny.
Oh yeah, that's what being an artist is.
And I guess to some extent that's true, but it's like, get over it.
Yeah.
You want to write something or not?
Yeah.
Because if you don't get over it, well, you may as well just stop.
Well, and there's something about, not to sound cliche or cheesy, but if you're an artist or if you have something inside you and you don't get it out, it will eat away at you and it will drive you insane. It will drive you crazy. If you have art to create on the inside of you, you have to let it out.
Well, I'll tell you, I used the word driven, and I did feel driven to write.
Isn't that fascinating?
This story, and I found it to be a very emotionally intensive experience.
Say more about that.
Well,
did it bring up a lot of emotions for you? Was it like a healing process? When you say that it was emotionally intensive.
It was emotionally intensive. I mean, not in a personal way, in the sense that it directly related to things in my own life, except, of course, it's all personally related because it's all fiction, and except then as a kind of exercise in me defining my own relationship to God.
Yep.
And the bigger questions about life.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I think is why these books are so great is, again, you're exploring these really, even if it's unintentional, you're exploring these really challenging topics without it feeling like it's being shoved down my throat. Like I said, even the side characters or the side plots are an exploration in how we show up to the world. How do we want to be? What do we believe is acceptable behavior?
Yeah, or if you want to read it as a historic Gothic romance for the 1840s plot, and the other part as a fictional kind of romance about a couple of 1970s hipsters.
Yep.
You can read it for that.
And also, that's what you can get as deep or as shallow as you want with this book, you guys. I will say, this is my only critique, Joe. I have one critique.
Yes.
I need my
Here
dictionary.
It comes. I knew it was coming.
I need my dictionary like every other page.
You're not the only person who said that, in fact.
I'm like, ooh, these are good words. What is this? But it comes mostly in the 1840s, because there's words like articles of clothing or pieces of furniture that's not how we refer to them anymore. Like a chemisette?
A chemisette.
Chemisette, stuff like that. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. We're gonna have to Google this.
Yeah, you probably don't want to have one in your dresser drawer. Yeah.
No, definitely not anymore. So it's, but I really do think now, so one thing I want to make sure we touch on. So where did the inspiration for the Albany Girls' School come from? Was that, did you look for something that you could draw from and put that into the book, or was there a connection there already?
Well, as that 1840 plot was developing, as I was writing it, it seemed to me that the logical next step would be for that girl's father to send her away to a female academy, as they were called in those days. And in my former sided life as an antique dealer, I'm still obsessed with 19th century culture. So in my former life, I was well aware of the existence of girls' schools and female academies. So I assumed that there probably was one in Albany, and I had already written it into the story while I was doing research, only to discover that, well, what do you know? There was an Albany Female Academy by that very same name.
Wow, that's funny.
And there were so many serendipitous things that happened in the course of writing these books. It's a little bit spooky. So, so there really was an Albany Female Academy.
Yeah.
And it also, one of the instructors there was also one of the first daguerreotypers in America. Daguerreotype being the very first photographic process.
And so you have a photograph from that school, is that right?
I have a sampler
Okay.
from that school.
Got it.
So it was, the Albany Female Academy covered the grades from probably something like second or third grade to high school.
Okay.
So more or less the ages from 9 or 10 or 11 to 16, 17 or 18. Things were not as tightly stratified then.
Got it.
With these things. And it was a private school, very private school.
Yeah.
Well, for the first 2 years, all of the students were required, amongst other things, to take twice weekly classes in needlework as in embroidery,
Okay.
cross stitch, petty point, these sorts of things.
Yep.
And at the end of these, they were required to produce a sampler.
Okay.
So I've actually found one that was completed in
Oh, sorry.
1834.
Cool.
And so just another one of those not so coincidental things that have happened
Yeah.
in the course of working on this.
Well, and I've loved, you have a pretty impressive collection of antiques, antique clothing, furniture, and things like that. And so your main character is an antique dealer from New York City. We can tell by your accent that you are not a Vermonter.
Oh.
I know, it's
You
shocking.
know, I knew you would bring that up. And you want to know the other thing?
Yeah.
So these novels are about a psychotherapist who becomes an antique dealer,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It was not until all three were published, and I was speaking with someone, and they say, well, isn't that funny? You were an antique dealer who became a psychotherapist. Oh, yeah. Right? So you would think that would have occurred to me. But no.
Well, that's why I think when you
blind
said
spot.
are you making a pun?
No.
Is that a pun?
No.
Is that a blind pun?
It's a psychological expression. Blind spot. Yes, a blind spot, I know.
We were joking.
You're making fun of my disability. That's
I know.
so ugly.
We were talking before we got started about how we can't take ourselves too seriously, and you made some joke, and I was like, I can't laugh at that. I'm not allowed to laugh at these things, and I just think that's one of the things that is that I love about you, Joe, is you have this irreverence that, not that we can't take life seriously, right? Like, life is serious and there are serious conversations.
You know what? In life, everything comes down to one or two responses. You can either cry about things or laugh about things.
Yeah.
I think it feels better to laugh about things because there's some things you just have to cry about. You can't avoid it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Laughing would be a completely inappropriate response and an impossible response, but usually it's not impossible.
Yeah.
So, given the choice, laugh or cry, what do you want to do?
Laugh.
Well, let's not take ourselves too seriously.
Oh my God, it's so true. Well, and I just think that if we, much like the point of psychotherapy, to me, and I could be, maybe I've got this wrong, but to me, the point of any kind of therapy is to come into right relationship and right perspective with your feelings or a circumstance or a person. And when we insist on making everything heavy and hard and the end of the world or traumatic, it's like, no, we have to be able to shift that if we hope to have a genuine therapeutic outcome. Is that would you agree? Is that reasonable?
I would say that's reasonable, and I would agree with it.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. It can't be heavy all the time.
And so I even see that in your characters, in the way that David is interacting with the people. He has that same sort of irreverence. I think that maybe that's not the right word, but he has that same sort of. He has these funny little quips and asides and a disarming of that weight and that seriousness.
You think so? Honestly, I can't think of an example of what you're describing, but you find it.
Oh yeah.
So that's
when Angela's talking about her experiences, or when the stewardess is making a pass at him, or he's just sort of like he's like the straight man in the interactions. That's a term when we're talking about comedy, but he just says these like, when he says these things that are the obvious thing to say in the circumstance, and it sort of disarms the situation. I don't know, that's the impression that I get. And I see you similarly when we're talking about heavy things going on in the world today. You have that same sort of practical irreverence that I think is really needed. I think everybody needs a psychotherapist who can teach them how to have that attitude.
No.
Yeah, no, it definitely is a compliment, because I feel like in today's culture, everyone wants to be a victim. There's currency in victimhood. And so if we can fight through that habituated reaction to feel sorry for ourselves, to feel sorry for, to have that self-pity.
Victimhood has become a virtue.
Yes.
And it's not inherently virtuous. It's not inherently virtuous to be a victim, but we have that stuck in our brains right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like the psychotherapist in the story addresses that. He's like, yeah, this sucks, or this thing that happened sucks, but look at the practical outcomes of it. So that's why I think that you're demonstrating psychotherapy even in your book. And I don't know if that was intentional, but
no, it wasn't.
Yeah, it's really well written. And that's what I think, that your characters are so available to the reader to see themselves in, or to have, I've had a similar situation or a similar reaction, and I can see myself in this character. And that's one of the things that I think is so cool, that I don't often get from reading fiction, is that investment and that relationship or whatever.
I deliberately avoided making what I thought would be two-dimensional, simplistic, black and white characters. In other words, they're good people and not good people.
Yes.
Good people and bad people.
Yes.
So in the 1840s plot, the girl who is the most enthusiastic abolitionist is also the biggest anti-Semite.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And then the girl with the slave is Jewish.
That's correct, yes.
And you would think, like, okay, but you're Jewish. You're not supposed to, don't you know better? I mean, that's what I was thinking in my head.
You would think.
Like, oh my God, if you Jews were slaves, you can't have slaves. What are you talking about? And you nailed it. That is what it is. Every single character has dimension. They have good and bad. And so they're not heroes or villains. They're just people.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you and I, we probably, both of us, have lesser qualities. And if we spoke long enough, maybe one of them would come out. But we have our better qualities.
Well, I don't
and we have
know.
our
I mean,
lesser
Joe,
qualities.
I'm perfect, okay? I don't know about you, but I'm totally kidding, obviously. And anybody who knows me even, people in politics and other things that I'm involved in will tell you the same thing. Eric, some people think I'm a villain, some people think I'm an angel, and some people think both.
Yeah, we are both. We are absolutely both. We are a little devil and we're a little angel. And so if you're going to write believable characters, they have to have good qualities and bad qualities.
Yeah.
It's not a beauty contest.
Damn it.
I think all of those characters have something about them that is not likable.
Yeah.
And I like that. that there's something about them which is not likable, because to me that makes them plausible.
Yeah.
And if they're not plausible, then why are you asking someone to waste their time reading about them?
Yeah. Well, thank you for not treating your readers like they're dumb, like some people. It's a good thing.
No.
That's a good thing. Okay, so go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, it sounds like you're wrapping up. What's going
I was
on?
going to say, is there
When
anything?
am I coming back?
Is there anything? Okay, Joe.
Yes.
I love this conversation. I love your books.
Yes.
I want to make sure that our viewers and listeners know exactly where they can go order these and how they can learn more about you, your social media, and stuff like that. So we know they can get the books on Amazon.
Yes, they can. The first 2 books can also be purchased at Barnes & Noble.
Oh, okay.
Not the 3rd one in paperback form.
Okay.
But all 3 are available as Kindles and as paperbacks from Amazon, and in paperback form, the first 2 from Barnes & Noble.
From Barnes & Noble.
And Phoenix Books in Burlington has copies
cool.
of the first 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just so everybody knows, in case you know, the last name Covais, Covais.
Yeah, Covais.
Covais.
And if people want to get, or interested to hear a little bit more of a sample of what the insides of the books are like, I would encourage them to go to YouTube to Psychotherapy with Ghosts.
Psychotherapy with Ghosts on YouTube.
And there is more information, including readings from all 3 novels.
Which is fantastic. Those videos look beautiful.
I'm
Whoever
told that they
produced
are
them
gorgeous.
did a
Yes.
fantastic job.
Yeah.
So you'll
That's
have to.
the rumor. That's the word on the street. Yes.
So, okay, so we've got, is there a way they can reach out to you directly?
Yeah, I'm in the phone book.
There's a phone book?
Literally, yeah.
I didn't even know they made a phone book anymore.
I know.
Is there an email that's better?
The email
phone call?
is psychotherapy with ghosts, one word,
Okay.
at Gmail.
Psychotherapy with Ghosts at gmail.com.
Yeah.
They can reach you there if they have questions or.
They can email me directly. I welcome that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And somebody wants to call me, go right ahead.
And
802-864-2822.
You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen.
So.
And I want to really encourage our homeschool audience out there. We've got a lot of folks who homeschool. This is sincerely an excellent book for English, history, or a subject like that, because it really does have not only actual people who existed, it's places. You could make this into a field trip. You could make it into like an arts and crafts by doing needlepoint, like you said. There's so much you can pull out of this to do with your students.
And even though there are some very adult themes, there is no swearing or graphic sex.
No vulgarity. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I would say for high school. I'd probably say high school.
Yeah, I would be okay with, say, my high school age niece reading this.
Yeah. There's like you said, there's
middle
some
school. I don't know, but high school, absolutely.
Yeah. I guess there is kind of a little bit of sex stuff in there, but it's not like graphic. Yeah, exactly. It's not like describing the situation, but it is, adult people having adult conversations and things.
Yeah, with adult problems.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So, all right, you guys, check out Joe's series of books. And are you a practicing psychotherapist as well?
I am.
So if somebody might be interested in your services and wanted somebody who wasn't going to tell them that they're terrible people,
that's
or
not out of
they're
the question.
dumb things.
But because I am not licensed, I cannot accept insurance
or anything like that.
Right.
Okay.
So if a person wants to pay out of pocket, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I'm not licensed.
Technically.
So it means I'm supervised.
Because I know there are people who are so desperate to have somebody to talk to, like you, like a David, that can just be real with them and isn't going to try to fix them or change them, but just be present in the therapeutic process.
Help them change themselves, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that. Again, you guys, I love these books. Go out and read them. Also, just Joe's awesome. You guys, I've been very blessed. I hope it's okay for me to say, and I'll cut.
Don't stop. You're just getting on a roll now.
Joe, I just want to take a minute to also just say, I got the benefit of having Joe's writing prowess. in my campaign last year. And you were such a delight to have on the team because of that, this attitude that you bring to the table that I described in your books. You crack jokes. You didn't let me take myself too seriously, and I just love the way that you love your community, that you want to make a difference, that you want to be a part of it, and just watching you really dive in and dig in, not only to your own personal journey, but also digging into being part of my community, of our community. It's just been such a pleasure and an honor to call you my friend and to have you on the show today and to really share your skills and your contribution to culture.
Stop. I'm going to cry.
Well, I wanted to tell everybody how awesome I think you are, Joe. And that's why I wanted to have him on to talk about this stuff, because I do feel so much like everything so much of our culture now is trying to change people and tell them how to be and how to think and that they're wrong and that there's something wrong with them. And I wanted to highlight an artist who is not pushing that agenda, who is not pushing their ideology onto other people, but instead asking questions and exploring and bringing other people into those conversations. I just love it. I think it's cool because I'm just so sick and tired of being preached to. I am so sick of it. So any opportunity to highlight art and culture that is not from a person being a jerk, I mean, it's what a pleasure. And it's actually good. Not only is it not woke, it's good. So you guys go to Amazon.com, buy the whole series, have your kids read it, share it with your friends, and then come back when we'll have you back when there's more to share, a new book or something else. We'll have to catch up with you and see where you're at.
That would be great. I would like that. That would please me very much.
Fantastic. All right, everybody. See you later. Bye.